Welcome to the weekend warm-up presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined by my Action Network co-host Duck. Every Friday, we're coming to you live as we make our final additions to our Saturday card. Some action on Friday as well. We're looking at the latest market movements, injury reports, weather forecasts, everything to help you stay ahead of the market for Saturday and beyond. And since we're live, we'll be taking questions from the audience along the way. You can submit your questions right here in the YouTube chat or over at the Action Network Discord or tag us on X. Lots of different ways to get to us. Before we get into the bets, though, there's a quick and easy way for you to tail us and all of the Action Network experts. First, sign up for Action Pro. You'll get instant notifications whenever an Action expert tracks a bet, whether that's me, Stucky, Colin Wilson, Duck, the whole team. You're going to get the best bets at the best prices. Plus, you can access our pro projections powered by Sean Kerner and his predictive analytics team and a ton of other benefits. And we still have a special offer going this fall. Just go to actionnetwork.com/pro and get $20 off the annual price with the promo code BBOC20. So don't miss out on the best bets at the best prices. Visit actionnetwork.com/pro and use promo code BBOC20 and get $20 off a year of Action Pro. All right, we are steaming on to the Steam report. That means Duck is going to get into the driver's seat here, talk us through some of the line movement. We're going to start in the colossal matchup in the American, which opened at about 7, 6.5. It's all the way down to 3.5. Memphis is now a short home favorite against Tulane. A lot of that has to do with the quarterback uncertainty as it relates to Brendan Lewis. If he is not a go, is it AJ Hill and kind of a wildcat quarterback behind him, or is it going to be his full game to be able to take the reins there at that Memphis offense? Duck, walk me through what you're hearing.
Well, the problem is we haven't heard much of anything. We heard earlier in the week that Brandon Lewis was a full go. Some of the assistant coaches had said he was a full participant and ready to roll. And then there was another media presentation with Ryan Silverfield where he was directly asked if Lewis was the QB1. And the comment that this hinged on was that Silverfield said, yeah, we're still evaluating. We're not sure if it's going to be him. We're going to play the guy who gives us the best chance to win. So I don't know if there's just getting caught up on that or if. Hey, I think it's gamesmanship. I think Brendan Lewis is playing. I think this is the game of the season. The season hinges in the balance here. You're able to take pole position in the conference race. That's such a critical game to stay on pace with South Florida, North Texas. And frankly, offense, defense, and special teams, I think Memphis is the better team. I think Tulane's been playing with fire all season. We just saw them get blasted by UTSA on the road last week. They've had so many squeakers, South Alabama, East Carolina, Army. This Memphis team is in just a completely another class than those opponents. And I just don't think Tulane's going to be able to line up and run the football here. And so you're going to task Retzlaff with trying to make plays against this Memphis secondary. And I don't think he can do it. I think Lewis is such a critical part, but this game is going to be won or lost for Memphis in the defensive trenches in the second half if they can really make life tough on Retzlaff the way that UTSA was able to. And so for anyone listening in, I like Memphis tonight. I laid it. I think 3.5 is a bargain. I think we're getting some gamesmanship here from Silverfield. I think Memphis wins this game by at least 7.
Yeah, Lewis is a gamer. He's a tough kid. Silverfield has said that repeatedly. I think there's a chance we'll still see maybe a little bit more of Maiden in those Wildcat situations when they move him in at quarterback to be able to take some of that short yardage rushing off of Lewis's shoulders. But I also want to bring up one point. This isn't related to how you should be playing this particular game. Silverfield, as you mentioned, has been quoted multiple times talking about Lewis. And earlier in the week, he said, this kid is so competitive, but we talked to him so much about, giving up sliding, not putting his body in harm's way. He took some big hits against Rice. Silverfield, why was he in when you were up 31 against Rice on a design quarterback run when he got hurt? I'm just like filing that away in terms of coaching mistakes that I do not understand. Like this team, I wouldn't say it falls off a cliff without him as their QB1, but their upside to make the college football playoff is not there without him playing at a high level. What are you doing when you're up by 31 against a Rice offense that couldn't score 31 points if you gave him 3 games? So the game was over and you're still running your quarterback. That one was a little bit baffling to me. All right, what's next in your Steam report, Duck?
Well, still on Friday night, USC and Northwestern and the Wildcats are taking some steam here. This line opened up about 16 earlier in the week, and it's been slowly matriculating down. And this has crossed 14 now. Now USC is slated 13 and a half, 14 flat some places, but you can get under 2 touchdowns here with the Trojans, which would seem like the interesting side. What I think is just so troubling out of USC camp is we've got all this constant schedule complaining. Every time that the Trojans have had to travel, we're getting sound bites in the media from their head coach that's just bitching and complaining about the travel situations, and even off the road win against Nebraska last week, where USC didn't play particularly well. They kind of found a way to win on the road. First thing he mentions is, well, I wonder if the schedule makers are gonna give us any breaks on the schedule. Oh wait, we got to double back for a Friday night game. Just a lot of whining, a lot of kind of woe is me mentality, and that doesn't work in an FBS football locker room for a lot of these guys. I don't know. I kind of think Northwestern, I've been impressed with their play of late. I think they can go in there and throw a couple punches. We've talked about this before. Their receiver talent, Griffin Wilde from South Dakota State, is exceptional. He'll make a play or two in this game, and it'll really, really surprise you. Preston Stone's going to have to be at his best. I, I don't know. I kind of think that Northwestern can hang around in this one.
A quick pivot to an SEC matchup. I think you basically covered everything there between the Wildcats and Trojans. I really wanted to get into this conversation beyond just the market movement between the Bulldog and Bulldog action there in Mississippi State and Georgia. What's interesting, I think, in the BCS era, you had a lot of style points. You were trying to impress the computers that had margin of victory as at least a single component or data point. And we've slowly moved away from that. And we've certainly moved away from that narrative as the field has expanded. However, I want to get your take on this. Georgia is in a great spot right now. They're fifth in the country. They only have one loss. But if they were to take a unexpected L at any point down the stretch, all of a sudden the committee could start playing the comparison game against this very same Mississippi State team because Texas has played Mississippi State, Tennessee has played Mississippi State, and Mizzou will play Mississippi State. So I think there's an opportunity for Georgia to make a statement here if they get into a, Pepsi challenge situation against a bunch of other SEC teams with the same amount of losses to be able to point to a common opponent like Mississippi State and beat them by 28 points as opposed to squeaking by in overtime or a single possession win. What are your thoughts on that creeping into your handicap here? Or do you think that's a little bit too complicated in terms of getting between the ears when it comes to Kirby Smart and how he thinks about blowing an opponent out?
Well, I think the fact of the matter is that would be a good mentality. I think that that would help try to, in Georgia's mind, maybe separate themselves or at least give the computer rankings something to think about. But can Georgia do it? Look at the way that they've played some of these games this season, and this Georgia front seven is no longer one that puts the fear of God into their opponents. This team has been very fortunate to get to where they're at. They could have lost against Tennessee on the road. They could have lost to Auburn on the road. They could have lost to Ole Miss. I mean, it took a 17-0 fourth quarter for them to win that one and distance themselves from the Rebels. And then last week against Florida, there were so many different things that had to align for Florida to not execute. Couldn't get third and short, fourth and short. Didn't get that long pass that just barely hit the ground. Couldn't get off the field on that last drive to try to get the ball back. You could argue Florida outplayed Georgia for long stretches here. And so for Georgia now, look what they've got on deck. You got big game after big game after big game. Ole Miss, Florida. You got Texas coming into your building next, and you got to go to Stark Vegas at noon for that team who has played so much more competitively than anyone thought. You look at their losses, two of them in overtime, and one of them was by 2 points. I mean, this team is legitimately top to bottom much more talented. They play better situationally. I don't think that motivation for Georgia to try to win this game with margin is enough to see the line move, in my opinion. I think Mississippi State is live here. I think Mississippi State is going to play their absolute best game of the season here in a spot where the downer spot for them is next week, because then after that you've got the Egg Bowl. But this is a real opportunity here in such a sleepy spot in the noon window with the cowbell humming. I mean, they're going to be juiced up for this one. I like Mississippi State.
The old Jefferson Pilot noon kick.
JP.
Yeah. You're going from a team that's probably going to make the playoff against a feisty, competitive team, really playing their heart out for their coach, to two teams of the ACC that are just drawing dead. Where are their motivations? Clemson and Florida State. This is a hard pass for me. I can understand why the line movement has gone, but you look at Clemson. Dabo is on the sideline screaming at people. No one gives a rip. They're not even looking him in the eye at this point. And then Norvell, is he a dead man walking? Who knows? But both of these teams, in an ideal situation, this would have been a top 15 matchup. Certainly after the first week, you thought maybe Clemson will bounce back, from a loss against LSU, but anything can happen the rest of the way. Florida State coming off a win against Alabama, and the whole season has just gone down the toilet. What are you seeing here between the Tigers and the Seminoles in a game that it's difficult to figure out where they are emotionally? Are they going to dip into their bench at all, play some of the younger guys for a little bit of juice? Because you have to imagine anyone who still has eligibility is 1 foot out the door at this point.
Yeah, and it's really tough to figure out where Clemson's mentality is at after just a bizarre season where they're 3-5. Really unprecedented times at Clemson, at least back looking back the last 15 or 20 years. And the defense has just completely disappeared for Clemson. They really struggled to get off the field at any point in their last two games at home against Duke and SMU. And really in serious danger is Clemson of not making a bowl game. This is real trouble here. And it's also interesting just to kind of see Dabo peel back the layers of the onion about things that he's concerned about. And I'm not willing to say that he's passing blame, but he has definitely provided a little bit of insight as to some of the refereeing and some of the things that he's seen from the officiating groups that he doesn't like. And I mean, I agree with him, but that's not why you're losing football games. Now, the Knowles, they were in this exact spot last week. I was questioning their mentality. You hadn't won a game since September 20th. You're out of the race in the ACC national title, I guess, hopes and dreams up in flames. And they rallied the troops big time against Wake Forest. And then all the two, three, four players came out and said, hey, you know what? Everyone's talking about firing Mike Norvell. Don't fire Norvell. The play on the field's on us. We love Norvell. We're going to play hard for this guy. And I was really encouraged by those sentiments because this team locker room has not been lost. The egos have not taken over. People aren't checking out. And I think this line move is pretty indicative of the fact that Florida State's showing up here ready to go. I don't have a play on this one, but I'm leaning Knowles. I think the Knowles are going to show up and this is a game that they have really gotten up for in years past. Sometimes they haven't played very well. This is a real chance for them to kind of get the monkey off their back.
I'm going to keep you on the hot seat here. Talk about another team that's in free fall. Is it the right time to buy given the current spread? And that's Iowa State. They dog walk Arizona State 39-14. They came into that game 14th in the entire country. They've lost 4 in a row, and they're kind of moving away from competitive football. I understand it was a one possession loss to Colorado, which is looking real bad, even though they were playing at Folsom. Then Arizona State in their last game, losing by 5. What's going on with the offense? Do you think there's any shot in the arm in terms of their running back room getting a little bit healthier? And is there a buy point here now that we've crossed over a full touchdown against TCU in Fort Worth?
Hard to really say with Iowa State. And the real problem that I have is that the defensive injuries are just piling up. And so the question now is they've got a real stud defensive tackle, Orange. Is he going to play? The linebacker room looks like they're battling some injuries. We already know about the injuries in the secondary. And I just don't know what we're going to see and how it's going to look. So I am at a full pass with Iowa State. I don't think this team is very good. We've seen them in free fall. I mean, there's a certain number where there's any buy point, but I just don't know what we're going to get here with these guys. And just so hard to know if they're going to show up or not. I think TCU is the team that's more likely to try to, keep pressing on forward. And if they were to run the table, which I'm not suggesting they're going to, but BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, there is a chance they could find themselves getting into the tiebreaker scenarios. So I think the full effort situation here is for TCU to pound these guys. And if you pull up the injury report for Iowa State and you just look at the long list, 4 or 5 different corners, Orange on the defensive line, Reineke in the linebacker room, there's just so many guys that are listed as questionable or out. And I just don't see how they field a defense that's capable of stopping TCU when they play at their potential. So pass on Iowa State. I would look TCU's way.
Let's now turn to South Bend, Indiana, under the watchful eye of Touchdown Jesus. Huge favorite, the Irish are against the Navy midshipmen. I'm a little bit surprised that this is in the 4 touchdown neighborhood after they went through the motions against Boston College, but the weather report isn't necessarily helping Navy. The colder and the wetter and the windier it could be potentially would be helpful, but at this point, it's going to be cold for sure. We may get a little bit of rain in the second half, but a light breeze. So in terms of the Notre Dame passing attack, which has really taken a massive step forward this year under Carr, you have to figure that Navy's defense is going to be stuck on an island. And usually Navy can work their way around islands, but in this case, there's just nothing they can do with that secondary that is so green. They've had injuries back there. They've been picked apart the entire season. But against a Service Academy offense that's pretty darn good, 28 seems like a key number that people should care about. Where is it at this exact moment? And do you have a lean or an official play on it?
Yeah, we saw this open 24 on Sunday, quickly went to 24 and a half, went to 25 and a half on Monday, hovered there for a while. 26 and a half on Thursday. Today it's 27 and a half. So a couple things before we get to the line. It just kind of feels like we've seen this song and dance before, where Navy runs through the Charmin soft light schedule only to fade late. In fact, we saw it exactly this point last season. When they played Navy, the lights were clearly too bright. They fumbled the game away, 6-0 turnover loss, or turnover ratio in the loss. But the middies were only catching 14 and a half last year. You get another chance against Notre Dame to punch above your weight class. The lights may not be too bright for Navy here, but they have to execute better situationally. When you just look back to their game against North Texas, they were only outgained by 22 yards, but 3 red zone turnovers and a fourth down stopped on downs just outside of the red zone were what inhibited the Navy attack. And situationally, North Texas did a really good job of defending the scheme. But Navy's got to it's got to be automatic. Third and short, fourth and short. You have that system. You've got Teska in the backfield and you've got Heidenreich on the outside. You've got to be able to get those fourth and short situations that you've hung your hat on for 25 years. I think Navy can move it a little bit here. And if they can avoid the turnovers, I think there will be an opportunity. And you mentioned the weather could be a little bit tricky for Notre Dame tackling these Navy players when you're running this weird scheme that you're not used to seeing with wet jerseys and it's wet on the field, your gloves are wet. It could be a little bit of an effect on the tackling. I would guess Notre Dame's defense, which has played really, really well this last half of the season up to this point, last 4 games or so. The defense has been ready to go. The offense has been a little sluggish the last couple of weeks. But what I think is happening here, and we're going to continue to see it. If you like Navy, wait until 3 minutes before kick. Notre Dame money is going to continue to pour in. I thought the cutoff point would be 28. We're at 27 and a half as we speak. It'll be 28 and a half tomorrow morning. It could go to 30 and a half before kick. So just trust me when I say it's one way. Notre Dame money is going to continue to pour in. If you like Navy, which I will make a play on Navy if the number's right, wait until 3 minutes before kick. You'll get the absolute best line. And I think Navy has a chance here to just be quasi competitive for a time. If they can pull an okey doke, if they can pull a trick play that Navy normally does not do, but if they have something up their sleeve, if they can get a little bit of the fullback going with Teska, I think there's a chance that they can stay on the field enough to maybe score 2 touchdowns and hang around the number. 28 or more, I'm in on Navy. Last year's game was such an anomaly with the turnovers, and they weren't catching enough points, frankly, but 28's a lot different number than 14.
Let's stick in the Midwest, head to Iowa City as the Oregon Ducks travel to take on the Hawkeyes of Iowa. Cold, rainy, soggy field conditions on tap. There's going to be moderate winds. The rain may taper off a bit in the second half, so just something to consider from a live total perspective. But this is going to be a slog, and Oregon is not coming in firing on all cylinders. Their performance against Wisconsin was borderline pitiful. They didn't even get to 340 total yards against the Badgers, a 21-7 win. The passing game was essentially nil in that one. And now they're up against an Iowa team that wants to shrink the game down. They want to use their running game. They want to use Gronowski to pick up those, gritty yards, certainly use them in the red zone. What are your thoughts on this game? Do you think the Hawkeyes are live? This is a game that I had circled back in August. I thought that this is the kind of game that Iowa could steal. And with Oregon now coming down from their heights earlier in the season when their offense looks like an absolute juggernaut, it seems like this could be a one possession game in the fourth quarter. What are your thoughts between the Hawkeyes and the Ducks?
Well, first question I'll say is who is this Iowa team that scored 34 points per game the last 3 weeks against Wisconsin, Penn State, and Minnesota? Now, my concern is a couple things. Will they be able to effectively run the ball here against the Ducks? Oregon allowing 3.3 yards per carry on the ground this season. PFF has this defense ranked third overall in the Big Ten, fifth against the run, second in overall tackling. The Ducks coverage unit is elite. They've held opponents to 150 passing yards or less in 6 out of 7 games this season against FBS competition. It would appear that this is one of those games where if you plug the run and you inhibit Iowa from being able to run the football, they will not be able to throw their way out of trouble. I don't know if it plays out that way or not. It would appear also that this is going to be a very, very slow paced game on both sides. Oregon is not running any tempo. Iowa's very, very slow. Both of these teams play sound defensive football. I would expect minimal explosive plays, and I would expect very slow pace on both sides. Iowa's defense has been good this year, but they're not exquisite. They're not an elite Iowa defense that we've come to know and love from before. Special teams is good, but the defense is, let's call it B defense. It's not A plus Ferentz defense. It's a good defensive unit, but it's not as nasty as the Iowa defenses that we've seen in the past. So I don't know here. My concern is I have not talked to a human being who lives in the United States that likes Oregon this week. Everybody that I've talked to, everyone loves Iowa. I think the price is a little cheap on Oregon. I think this should be 7.5. And I just think that you're getting such a bargain based on Iowa's recent performances. That's not to say that this is going to be a blowout because I don't think it will be. But you're getting the Ducks at 5.5 or 6. I just think that they're the more talented football team, and they've been battle tested with a trip to Happy Valley at night in a game they were able to win. I don't know. I don't have an official play on this game, but I just feel like I haven't heard anybody wanting to back the Ducks here, and you're under a touchdown. It's just a little concerning for me that there's no resistance the other way. So it seems like one of those real darling dogs that, gosh, at the end of the day, would it stun anybody if it's 24-17 final, and Oregon ended up being the side that covers. So I'm going to pass, but I just feel like the price is a bit cheap on Oregon.
Time to get to our first question. The tortillas are kicking through town like tumbleweeds in the hub city. Okay, I read that right. I guess he's talking about the wins in Lubbock for Texas Tech against BYU. And it's something that has to be considered. I can read you off the most recent weather report. It's going to be 73 and sunny. That's nice. But hold on to those tortillas. It's going to be 19 miles per hour sustained winds and gusts up to 30 miles per hour. This is obviously something that can ground both of these passing attacks. I know that Morton is now a full go. He's not even listed on the injury report anymore. That's good news for Texas Tech. Even their third string quarterback, I think it's Griffiths from Wake Forest. He has some experience. If they have to go to him, it'd be nice if they could go to Hammond, but they're not dead in an indoor situation. But with winds at 30 miles an hour, forget the running game. So I guess that's my question to you, Duck, and kind of piggybacking off the original question that came in. With the winds like this, is this an auto under? And which running game do you have more faith in it with, BYU with LJ Martin or with Texas Tech with their stable backs?
Well, that all depends on how much of that magic elixir BYU has left in the jar because they've used it this year. If you look at some of the ways that BYU has won football games this year, they were very fortunate to come out on top against Colorado, pulled the rabbit out of their hat numerous times at Arizona, significantly outgained by Utah. Frankly, Utah got outcoached. I think Utah had some decisions that they could have, if they could do it again, they would make different decisions in the Holy War. And BYU, in a bad spot, found a way to win on the road convincingly at Iowa State in the second half. So I think the way that they win these games is a little bit unsustainable, but I think BYU is exceptionally well coached. They don't make mistakes. Generally, they don't give up a ton of explosives on defense. I just do not have any idea how BYU goes in there and lines up and runs the football. Texas Tech, 2.4 yards per carry on the ground this season, giving up 70 rushing yards per game. And the defensive line is nasty, 28 sacks, 67 tackles for loss. We've seen this defense frustrate almost every opposing quarterback. And I think the formula is you plug the run holes, you force a substandard quarterback to have to make plays through the air. And listen, I mean, Bear Bachmeier is young. He was not in for spring. So the fact that he's matured week to week is impressive. He's fairly careful with the ball. He doesn't wow me, but he has not been garbage by any stretch. He's been very serviceable for his first year in the program. You're lining up against some major dudes there for Texas Tech, and I just don't see how this is going to go. Now, with the win factored, you can creep a guy in the box, you can stuff the run with a strong safety, or you can maybe pull the nickel back in tight to try to run from the weak side help. I think there is going to be some things they can do to really make BYU struggle. I mean, Texas Tech's defense is elite. They're tops per PFF, tops in the Big 12 in everything, run D, tackling, coverage, first in everything. I don't see how BYU moves the ball here. I would take team total under 20 and a half. Maybe it's 28-20, maybe it's 35-20, maybe it's 17-10, but I think BYU will score less than 20.
Let's head due east from Lubbock to the SIP, talking about Oxford, Mississippi. The Grove is going to have perfect weather. There was wind and rain on the menu, but it looks like it's going to be bookended around their kickoff. So it's basically going to be a perfect day in the Grove. Good day to throw down some drinks and watch an absolute blowout between the Citadel and the Ole Miss Rebels. What is it, 53? Who can bet this number, given the fact that Lane Kiffin has basically let the cat out of the bag? He's like, yeah, we didn't prep at all for some of these teams we played, like Washington State, and we played with our food and almost lost. If he's doing that against Wazoo, he's certainly not putting in any effort against the Citadel. I forget about this game prediction. What's the biggest number you've ever laid in a college football game and actually hit?
Well, about 2014, Oklahoma State opened their season playing Savannah State. They were laying 56 and a half, and it was the biggest talent mismatch I had ever seen at any point during my gambling career. I laid the 56, it was 77 to nothing. And
Was that the
so,
Savannah State team that also played Florida State and lost like 89 nothing that season? Like
yep,
they funded their entire athletic department with those two paycheck games, but they just absolutely took a beating.
they did. And so there's it's so funny you bring that stuff up because this is one of those situations as well where you get the late November kind of quasi bye week for the SEC where Alabama always schedules the FCS and half these other teams do. Well, Alabama never covers those games. They never covered those games under Saban. They'd be laying 48 and a half, 45, 51. It'd be 38-3 because that's just not the intention of the game for these coaches. Now, in this spot too, I think it's interesting because if you look who Ole Miss has on deck, they got the Gators on deck in a revenge spot from last year where they did not win that game last year. And I think maybe you're spending this week prepping for the Gators to really pound them and take it to them in your home finale. Yeah, I don't see how you could lay 53, 54 and a half. The other thing I'll mention too is we have a situation of a similar nature where the Citadel played last year at Clemson and they ran right up their ass the entire game. They Citadel ran for almost 300 yards against Clemson. And they did so. They scored 14. It was 51-14. Citadel had three red zone opportunities in the first half. They came away with 0 points. The Citadel showed up big time. Now, they're not a good football team. They're not going to compete here to win the game. But if you are not prepping for it, and Ole Miss, like you said, has clearly shown this propensity to just show up, wake up out of bed, roll in, and just win by 10 points against Wazoo. I don't see how they're going to cover this number. I think if the Citadel gets to 14, it's a lock. I think if they score one touchdown, we're good. So I would take the points with the Citadel.
I believe you've triggered the Nick Saban quote about getting run on by Georgia Southern. They ran through our ass like shit through a tin horn, man. We couldn't stop them. One of my favorite quotes of all time from a college
Yeah.
football coach. All right, let's look at one weather game that, I mean, there's going to be a chance of some light rain, some winds, but it's a major heat game, and that's between Tulsa and FAU. On the field temps are going to cross over 90 degrees. So, a consideration between two teams that play Matador defense is tackling optional in this matchup between these two American defenses. Maybe a second half over, something to consider. FAU, though, obviously, they've kind of been a mess in year one under Kitley. It just hasn't worked with Veldkamp as the QB1. But what are your thoughts on the Golden Hurricane? I know you've played Tulsa a lot, you've watched closely a lot of Tulsa games. They also have a first-year head coach. What are you seeing in this game, and does weather and the potential, fatigue in the second half factor into your thoughts on the total?
Well, I don't know. We're getting the rain, aren't we?
So at this point, it looks like it's going to be scattered. So obviously everything is a consideration. It's not going to be necessarily the thunderstorm stop and start that we see in late August, early September for Florida games. So if there is some rain, that clearly is a consideration for an air raid offense like the one that FAU is putting out there. But I still think these defenses leave so much to be desired in terms of fundamentals that if they are gassed, some of these longer drives, there's going to be some broken tackles and some opportunities to punch it in for six in the red zone.
Very possible. The problem is FAU is not punching it in for six in the red zone, and that's been the
Oh, they're
major
the worst. I,
concern.
I can attest to this. It's like every time they get there, they're like, wait, we have to be so close to the other team and there's no space over. It's like the first time they've ever been in a red zone situation. I hate this FAU team. They should have cashed so many overs for me this year. But yeah, it's truly unbelievable because you would figure halfway through the season, all right, we're 132nd in red zone efficiency. Let's throw out everything we have in terms of those plays and try to run some new packages, maybe Wildcat, maybe, a double pass, a Philly special. They've come up with absolutely bupkis, even though they know that this is the issue holding them back from being a winning football team.
Yeah, and some of the decision making has been just so unbecoming of a veteran coach, and that's what we're seeing with Kitley is that situationally in the red zone and on fourth down, I mean, he's just shown such a flippant nature to go for it on fourth down at any point on the field. I mean, he went for it on 4th and 2 from his own 14-yard line in a game this year. It's unbelievable to be able to take that risk. I can appreciate some level of risk, but there's so much variance when you're not converting on fourth down and when you're not cashing in the red zone. And I know you want to score points, and sometimes it's like, well, we'll do anything we can to score 40 points a game, even if we're putting our defense out there in terrible spots. And I just don't know. We've seen it be disappointing. They're very, very heavily reliant on Messer in the slot. And if Veltkamp and Messer are not connecting, the offense just looks a little bit just out of sync, out of sorts, jerky. It's not good. And I just don't know. The season hasn't gone according to plan. They've got the. I mean, this is to their credit. This is probably their last real chance this season to get a win. But I also think Tulsa has still got a couple of things that they're trying to do and do well. They took Temple to the wire. They played really well on the road last month against East Carolina. And Trey Lamb and the defense for Tulsa has played so much better than what we saw last year. Under Kevin Wilson, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The last 4 games of the season, Tulsa's defense completely quit. And that hasn't happened yet with Trey Lamb's defense. They're flying to the ball. They're really wrapping up well. The pursuit is good. I think that Tulsa can do enough to win the game. I think it's weather dependent on the total because if we get the wind and the rain, yeah, maybe not. If we get a sloppy field out there at FAU, yeah, maybe not. If it's fine and there's not a lot of the elements, then yeah, maybe it's a pinball machine and both these teams go back and forth.
All right, we have two more weather implications to consider. Washington Huskies traveling from Seattle to Camp Randall to take on the Badgers. The temps dropping down into the freezing range in game. Could get some second half rain as well. It's worth noting in Seattle, it very rarely gets that cold being there on the water. I mean, they're certainly trained to play in soggy conditions, but something to consider. Also, Wisconsin giving the vote of confidence for Fickle. They're not going to fire him, basically insinuating that his buyout's too big. They're at least going to give him one more year. So maybe that stabilizes Wisconsin a little bit. They certainly looked pretty good against the Ducks 2 weeks ago defensively. What are your thoughts on this one between the Huskies and the Badgers?
My thoughts are, I mean, what you said is true. It rains in Seattle and it gets pretty chilly up there in the Pacific Northwest, but it does not get butt cold like it's going to be here in Wisconsin. When it's 32 degrees and it's raining and windy, it is absolutely butt cold. I lived in the upper Midwest for a long time and it is not fun. And you just got the boost there by doing the vote of confidence for Fickle. I think the players generally are relatively happy about that. I think we get a real spirited, inspiring performance from Wisconsin here. But this is a dead nut under game for me. Wisconsin has zero explosivity in their offense. The quarterback play has just been It's been up and down, mostly down. And I think Washington's defense travels a little more than we might think. I like Damon Williams. I think he's a great quarterback talent, but this is a tall ask in Camp Randall against a defense that is showing up. Wisconsin's not exceedingly talented this year defensively, but you know what? It was 34 nothing against Ohio State, closer than that in the first half. They hung in there a little bit against the Ducks. They hung in there against Michigan. They hung in there against Maryland. This defense is not garbage, and I think that they'll do enough to at least resist what Washington wants to do. But the problem for Wisconsin is they've scored 27 points in their games since the third week of the season total. They're scoring 5 points per game the last 5 weeks. It's just not an offense that's talented enough to do anything to really put a lot of points on the board. And so I think if they can outpossess Washington, if they can play the field position game, if they can make this game 16-13 into the fourth quarter, they can try and give themselves a chance. I think it's too many points, but my play that I have in pocket is under 45.
Gonna do a little two for here, talking San Diego State against Hawaii. There's a chance for rain in game. There's a chance for the winds to kick up to about 10 miles per hour. But also, latest news on San Diego State's QB1, Jaden Denegal. He's questionable for this game, which means they turn over the offense to Burt Emanuel Jr. And if you remember his time at Central Michigan, the guy is an electric runner. So they've had time this week with him getting QB1 reps to maybe put a couple run packages around him and kind of change up the identity of this offense. But everything changes if it's, Denegal to Emmanuel Jr. What are your thoughts on this one? I know that we have the head-to-head bet from the Group of Five Deep Dive show, and I am on the Bows getting 6.5. The number's actually bubbled up to 7 in the market. I don't know if that's some inside information that they believe that Denegal is going to play, and it's a bit of a head fake from this Aztec coaching staff, or if they don't think it matters. I think it certainly should matter. What are your thoughts on this pivotal Mountain West matchup?
Well, we have strength on strength, and people talk about the Hawaii offense being back. And I will say that Alejado has looked very good since he's been coming back from the ankle injury, which inhibited him earlier in the season. But they have played four atrocious defenses. Just go look up who the opponents have been. It's been really bad. Now you're playing San Diego State, whose defense is absolutely elite per Mountain West standards. They've been the best defense in the conference all season. They really have only had one game this year where they didn't show up defensively, and that was the second game of the season on the road against Wazoo. Other than that, they've allowed 0, 3, 10, 0, and 7 points. They allowed 24 against Colorado State, but that game was long decided, and Colorado State had some cheapies in the fourth quarter. But they've shut down every offense every week, and they're playing good complementary football. The offense has not been exceptional for San Diego State, but they know that, and they're calling the game in order to manage the game. They play the field position game very well. They have elite special teams. Sean Lewis has done a great job with the special teams and a great coverage unit. You're not throwing the ball on these guys. 50% completions allowed, just 2 touchdowns and 7 INTs the last 3 weeks. I think the run and shoot will have some success, and we made mention of this on the pod that Hawaii has their full arsenal of receivers, and that has been a big driver in why this offense is running well. But I think it's going to play out a little bit more closely to how that Fresno State game played out for Hawaii earlier in the season, where Fresno was able to outpossess them. They were able to play the field position game. They were able to get some key stops on third down. And I think this will be a close game. I really do. There's not going to be a blowout either way. This is going to be could be tied in the fourth quarter. This is going to be an epic battle. One I will absolutely be staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning watching. And I have a play in pocket on the under. I took the under on the openers at 51 and a half. I think we're still good. Anything 49 and a half or more, I think we're still good on the under. And I just feel like San Diego State's defense is going to show up and show out. Hawaii's defense has been very underrated. Now, they gave it up in the pass department against Jose and against Air Force. Did well to control Utah State in the second half of that one. Utah State went 26 minutes without scoring to end that game. And so Hawaii's defense is overperforming specifically at home. I think they'll put the clamps on San Diego State a little bit, but this has 24-20 written all over it, I think. So I like the under. I like a low scoring affair. Should be a fun bout, though, late on Saturday night.
All right, we're going to turn to some more breaking news. CJ Daniels remains out for the Miami Hurricanes, and I think that is gambling alarm bells for Malachi Tony's prop bets. He had 13 targets in the last game with Daniels sidelined. I think I'm going to play every single over that's out there in the market on this kid. If you take over 78.5 receiving yards for him and parlay it with multiple touchdowns, it's 7-2 out there. He is the number one guy. He's someone who's going to be explosive. You saw the multiple touchdown game against Florida State earlier this year. I think that's the way that you play the Miami Hurricanes this week. I think this is like a neck crack kind of game for their offense. They've had some struggles in the past month. I don't think they're going to run into much resistance here in this one. As I mentioned before, Baron Morton is a go for Saturday. Got Mitch Griffiths as the backup quarterback, bumping up from number 3, replacing Hammonds. Juju Lewis is going to make his first career start for Colorado against West Virginia. It's basically been mop-up duty for him to this point in his career, but with a struggling Buffs team, he could potentially be that shot in the arm. They also, if they win out, they could make a bowl game. I think at least they're going to give some effort in this spot with a young 5-star quarterback. What are your thoughts on Dion being able to circle the wagons and at least get them to give solid effort for 60 minutes here in Morgantown?
I don't see any way how that's going to happen. I think that he's lost the locker room. I think this team has quit. The effort, and it's not about the final. I can look past the final and see that they were blown out. But when you look at the offense and they're trying to run quarterback sneak, and the quarterback is doing it out of shotgun, and the offensive linemen are turning around saying, "No, get up here and run this under center," and he shakes them off. And there's discombobulation in just running a quarterback sneak and the defensive effort. And the offense throws an interception and no one's pursuing the intercepting team and trying to make a tackle. It is stunning at this level. Like this is the effort that we see from a high school football team in Maine when you're 1-8, you're playing your playoff game, it's 42-0 at half, and you got to go out and play the second half before turning your pads and your mouthpiece in. It's like this is bad, bad effort by Colorado. And you saw what West Virginia did last week on the road against Houston. They whooped their ass in the trenches like I could not believe it. And Scotty Fox looked poised. What I saw West Virginia do to Houston was stunning, especially given that Houston was at home and they were still in the race. In their mind, you're playing for a conference championship and a spot to go to the playoff. And you get embarrassed like that. I think Rich Rod is starting to get some things figured out offensively here, and I don't know that Colorado can defend it. I don't like what I've seen from Colorado's offense really over the course of this entire season. To their credit, they have not abandoned the run like they did last year. Last year, they completely abandoned. I mean, there were games they were running the ball 5 times last year. They haven't done that, but they're not running the ball effectively. They're not explosive. Caden Salter or not, I don't care. I don't think this team's very talented. And if you look at West Virginia and what they have coming the rest of the way, I mean, it was such a big win for the WVU Mountaineers last week. And if I'm West Virginia, I'm thinking, let's give ourselves a chance to try to go out and win the next 3 and get to a bowl game. I don't think they're going to do that, but in the locker room's mind, it's like, hey, let's make this season a success in year 1 under Rich Rod.
Couple quick hitters here. Indiana's Surratt is questionable, their wide receiver. It'll likely come down to how his hamstring responds to warmups. So something to keep an eye on Saturday morning. The rare non-action middle of the week game, Eastern Michigan against Bowling Green, being played on Saturday. For the Eagles, Lockett is returning or should return for the first time in 6 weeks. Basically bolstering their passing attack a little bit, but the defensive injuries are mounting for them. Nearly the entire EMU secondary is either injured or playing through injury, so somebody to consider there. Do you think Bowling Green's a live dog in this spot?
I do. I have them in the round robin parlay along with the 2 teams that we talked about on the pod and a few others, which the video has been posted if you want to go take a peek at that. But Bowling Green fired their offensive coordinator over the last couple of days here, or last week, and it really needed to be done. Bowling Green's offense was just absolutely atrocious. There was no creativity. Northern Illinois needs to do that as well, my goodness. But Bowling Green might have a little bit more of a dynamic look to their offensive approach this week. I think they'll do some things that we haven't seen on tape, and so it'll surprise. And Eastern Michigan's defensive injuries are such to where I think that Bowling Green can put up a big number. I think Eastern Michigan, especially getting the boost with Lockett, who's such an explosive playmaker at the MAC level, I think they can kind of go back and forth a little bit. Could be a sneaky overplay here on this one.
All right, let's look at another one that's a potential ladder opportunity. You called out Coastal a few weeks back. You called one of their upset wins. I think they were plus 175 as a dog. I think the secret's out on them but they're only laying 7.5 against Georgia State, and they're a mash unit defensively. Their starting safety and third leading tackler, Jordan Huff, is likely out. A starting linebacker, Kobe Jones, is out. Three others in their two deep are out. So this is a completely remade offense for the Chanticleers. Do you think that they just boat race this Georgia State team that is lifeless with just one win on the entire season?
Well, I think Georgia State would have a better chance if they were catching 20 once a year or twice a year. They always win those crazy games where they're catching 20 and they get overlooked and you look up in the middle of the third quarter and they're up by two scores. And so we haven't really gotten that sort of performance from Georgia State yet this season. I just wonder with Coastal Carolina though, this is a team that struggles to tackle. They struggle at times to defend the run. I don't know that the defense is there to be what I would want in order to matriculate a blowout. I like over. I think this game's going to be back and forth. I really like what I saw the last couple of weeks from Georgia State offensively. The offense is still out there trying. They've scored 20 points in each of their last three games. There's been no quit in the Panthers. Um, and I think that Coastal Carolina's defense is one that will give up the explosives. They will give it up on the ground a little bit. I'm not really. I'm not really sure if they can contain. Georgia State has an exquisite receiver, Hurst, and he can score from anywhere on the field. And we saw that against South Alabama. I think we see it a little bit here as well. Georgia State has horrific special teams, and so we could see a big return in the special teams game for Coastal Carolina. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Coastal Carolina's offense has just been such a better operation since they put Collier in there at quarterback. They've scored 40 points the last 2 weeks. They looked really good against Louisiana Monroe in a weather affected game where there was a ton of rain. They couldn't do a lot, but still looked good in that game. I think both these teams could possibly be in the 30s, and I think we're looking over 57.5 here.
So I mentioned earlier an opportunity for the Miami offense to feel good about themselves against Syracuse. Syracuse, when they have the ball, some major issues on the offensive line. They've been shuffling the deck there. They've just not gelled. There's no cohesion. They also have, a lacrosse player as their quarterback. They got two wide receivers out. Could spell big trouble for the Orange. A reminder, you can also tail all the bets that you've heard in this live episode by going over to the quick slip links in the video description. You can also visit actionnetwork.com/bet now to find all of those plays and tail anything that we've discussed. Also, you can go ahead and subscribe, follow to the Parlay Express account in the free award-winning Action Network app. That's where we'll be posting lots of our plays in the entire Action Network universe. So the moneyline parlay that we had in the Tuesday show is in there. You're going to find a bunch of other long shot bets and fun parlays as well. Speaking of our card, let's close this out with some additions. You're going to the Ivy League here on Friday night. Harvard is the class of the Ancient Eights. They are undefeated on the season, and they're going as far north in Manhattan as you possibly can without falling into the Harlem River. They're taking on Columbia. Talk me through why you have no problem laying the big points with the Crimson.
Yeah, and I understand why this line is such. Generally, in the Ivy League, when you've got your top team playing your bottom team, the talent disparity between those two is it's like the NFL, right? Where the best team in the NFL and the worst team in the NFL, it's about 12 points. You're never going to have 28 point spreads in the NFL. Same thing with the Ivy League. Top to bottom, it's about four touchdowns. Oh, historically. Well, this Harvard team is an absolute wagon. They are lights out defensively. They have an electric quarterback in Jaden Craig. They have three receivers that are playmakers. This should be closer to five touchdowns. And when I look at Harvard, their defense has been elite all season. Their offense does not turn the ball over, and they can score and score quickly. Columbia played a game this year against Dartmouth, who's also very strong in the Ivy League, and the game completely snowballed against Columbia. They didn't have a chance. 49-3 was the final. Harvard was ranked ninth in the most recent FCS playoff committee rankings. That's important because the top eight seeds get a bye and a more favorable draw to a path to the semis. Well, Harvard was ranked below Tennessee Tech, Monmouth, who doesn't have their starting quarterback, and also two lost South Dakota State, who has looked like complete garbage recently. I would feel a little bit slighted if I was Harvard. They need to win these next couple of games and win them convincingly. While nobody in the Ivy League is overt about pouring it on and being rude about it, I think Harvard has a chance here to put up a big number, 42, 45 points, and I don't think Columbia has the offensive prowess to keep up. They just don't have the quarterback play. They've rotated between three quarterbacks this season. I wrote this one up in the Action Network app. There's an article out there, so go take a peek at that. Anything under four touchdowns, I'm laying it with the Crimson tonight.
I'm going to add Vandy now that it's under a touchdown, 6.5 as a home favorite against Auburn. They're 5-2 in the last 2 years under Clark Lee as a home favorite. I don't quite understand this one. I understand that sometimes you get a dead cat bounce, firing your coach, you get a new play caller in there or interim head coach that's just, letting it fly. But Vanderbilt's a buttoned up team. This is one of those situations where the helmet and the jersey, I think, are impacting the public's perception. The only teams they've lost to are quality teams this year, and they've kind of handled it. They play a brand of football that I think is more consistent week to week. They're not necessarily a high-flying passing team where they need to be in rhythm. They can run the ball, they can get all the gritty yardage to move the sticks. What am I missing between the Tigers and the Commodores in this one?
Well, I will say Auburn's defensive line is nasty, and if you're Vanderbilt, you're not going to line up here and run the football. And I've talked about Auburn a ton of different places because I had the regular season win under for Auburn, which is already in the bag. I thought that they were really going to struggle through this brutal stretch. Pavia will not have a chance to Pavia Hugh Freeze for the fourth time, which is unfortunate, but. Season loss for Auburn. And, I just, the defense has hung in there during this tough stretch. The defense has not been gashed. The offense is the problem. There's no direction. There's just minimal game plan, 15 points per game in league play. They're not scoring a lot of points. But excuse me, I would assume the defense shows up here. Five conference opponents have failed to run for 100 yards. 2.5 yards per carry on the ground given up this season. They're eighth in defensive success rate and 10th in EPA per rush. So Vandy is not going to line up here and run the ball. They're going to have to get creative about doing it other ways. They've got a couple really stud receivers. Stowers is one of them. Spence, who's 6'7", 255. They got to get him involved. The major question here is what is Auburn going to be able to do offensively, and are they going to revamp the offense now with new leadership? Because it's been broken all season. So yeah, I really don't know what we'll see from the offense. I think this one's going to be low scoring. I think Vanderbilt is going to have to move it through the air because they're not going to run it. And I think we go under on this one. If Auburn shows up defensively, they will at least keep it somewhat close, but it's all about how their offense looks because it's been garbage all season.
Let's close it out with a total between Wake Forest and Virginia. You have an angle here. As everyone knows, the Wahoos have been one of the luckiest teams in the entire country, but sometimes you can go a whole season. Yes, it's a smaller sample size, it's only 9 games. They've won close. They've certainly had the benefit of turnover margin at times this year and some lucky breaks and some lucky calls. Do you think it keeps going, and how does that impact the total here?
Well, I hope it keeps going. I have my 200 to 1 on Virginia that I'm holding in pocket here and sweating out. And so, hoping and praying we get to a point there where that really looks juicy for me, down to 4 to 1. But I've been so impressed with Virginia, specifically last week against California, how they competed in a tough travel spot. And even in games where their offense has put up complete turds, their defense has shown up and fought hard. So you look at Wake Forest, back-to-back outputs where they've had 13 and 7 points respectively, 4.1 yards per play against SMU, 3.5 against Florida State last week. Robbie Ashford has just not looked like himself the last couple of weeks. Been disappointing. UVA's defense is for real per ACC standards. 20 points per game given up the last three. 3.5 yards per rush. They're top four per PFF in overall defense, tackling, and special teams. And Wake has been just so inhibited by penalties. 600 penalty yards against Wake Forest on 67 accepted penalties against them. The Deeks have found themselves behind the sticks a lot. They can't throw their way out of it. They give up and gift uh, possessions to the opponent, or extend drives, I should say, with defensive bonehead penalties. UVA's defense is excellent on third down. Wake struggles to convert. File this one away, guys. Wake is horrific in the red zone. 28 red zone trips, 10 red zone touchdowns for Wake Forest. Horrific in the red zone. Wake is going to kick field goals. It's not going to get it done. I like Wake's team total under 21. I like the full game total under 48 and a half. You're muted.
difficult for me to do the outro for the show if I'm muted. I appreciate everyone tuning in live here, hitting us up with some questions, showing us some love in the chat. We'll be back next Friday for more live action. And that'll do it for the weekend warm up under the Big Bets on Campus banner presented by DraftKings. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to download the free award winning Action Network app. Leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to the podcast. And when it comes to YouTube, please like and subscribe and comment. The more we can get of that, the more the algorithm bumps us up to the top of really the industry, gives us an opportunity to get in front of a new audience and grow our brand. If you haven't already, please, once again, subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's all we're asking you to do. Please hit that little bell button. Make sure you're alerted every single time that we go live. Thank you so much for following all of our college football content, which is slowly but surely going to include in some college basketball in the coming weeks before we make the full transition to the college hardwood in January. Thanks for listening to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This has been the Weekend Warm Up.